They came in waves, sleek, shimmering hulls gleaming like gods descending upon the void. Hundreds of vessels, perfectly aligned, boasting technology honed over centuries of conquest. The alien coalition fleet had arrived at the edge of Terran space, not with caution, but with certainty. Their sensors scanned the emptiness, detecting only a single human ship floating alone, cold, motionless. A relic. The alien command bridge echoed with laughter. Their generals mocked the sight before them, one aging warship standing sentinel over an entire sector. It didn't power weapons, didn't respond to hails, didn't even move. A commander scoffed, calling it humanity's farewell museum piece. Another joked they'd bring it back as a trophy. Their fleet had burned empires and shattered planetary defenses. One ship wouldn't even register as a target. Despite the quiet, their systems were working fine. Scans showed outdated Terran alloy plating, inert weapon pods, inactive propulsion. A few suggested it might be bait, but most waved it off. The consensus was clear: it was either ceremonial or abandoned. It posed no threat. The fleet reformed into a spearhead pattern, confident this would be an easy warm-up before their real advance. Propaganda ships already began recording footage for the eventual victory montage. Commentators spoke of the last war relic about to fall. The admiral of the coalition fleet initiated open broadcasts on all frequencies, mocking Terran silence with grand threats and arrogant declarations. He demanded the immediate surrender of Earth's defenses, promising mercy in return for obedience. The human ship, still shadowed in distant starlight, gave no reply. It remained fixed, its form half obscured by a passing asteroid field, distant and lifeless. Inside the coalition command network, bets were made. Would it be destroyed in a single volley? Would the hull crack before the first wave hit? Confidence flooded the channels. No one doubted the outcome. Not a single alien officer considered retreat, or even caution. They had every reason to be sure of themselves. Their fleet was unbeaten. Their firepower unmatched. With the countdown initiated, the first line of destroyers shifted forward. Plasma cannons rotated into position, targeting locked onto the Terran ship's spine. Simultaneously, missile silos prepared coordinated launches. All telemetry confirmed no change in the human ship's status. It didn't raise shields. It didn't charge weapons. The impression was clear: it had accepted its fate. As firing solutions finalized, some commanders chuckled. One even toasted, raising a silver flask to the obliteration of the last echo of human defiance. The countdown ticked down, 5, 4, 3. Suddenly, a flicker. Barely perceptible. The lights within the Terran ship's hull dimmed, then surged, almost like a heartbeat. One technician noticed it and reported a strange energy pulse, but the signal was dismissed as scanner interference. After all, old ships leaked energy like that all the time. 2 seconds from firing, the alien fleet's targeting arrays glitched. Just a stutter, fractional second, but enough to cause temporary lock loss. Dozens of gunners realigned quickly, assuming it was a calibration error. They didn't even consider canceling the strike. It was too late for that. Arrogance had momentum. Then came silence. Not from the Terran ship, but from the sensors. All systems pointed at the human vessel flatlined for a moment. No heat signature. No mass reading. No light absorption. As if the ship had simply vanished. Before command could react, it returned to visibility, but changed. Its outline was the same, but now the hull shimmered with patterns that danced like fluid metal. Its weapon pods rotated slowly, not with aggression, but with deliberation. Lights no longer flickered, they pulsed in perfect rhythm. A low-frequency wave blanketed the space around it, undetectable to most instruments but felt, deep in the bones of every alien officer. The alien fleet froze. No one issued fire commands. No one laughed anymore. In place of mockery, there was confusion. Then anxiety. Then something worse. Still, not a single word came from the Terran ship. The admiral, voice unsteady, gave the order to initiate the volley manually. Too many irregularities. Finish it now. But before a single weapon could discharge, the human ship moved. Just once. A single pulse from its core. No explosion. No sound. No visible weapon. But a flagship, third in command, sitting at the center of the rear formation, disappeared. Not destroyed. Not vaporized. Gone. Wiped from all sensor records. One moment there, the next, nothing. Even the debris was absent. Not a trace. That was the moment everything shifted. Mockery died instantly. Pride turned to fear. Comms filled with shouts, demands, panicked analyses. No one understood what had happened. The Terran ship remained where it was, unmoving again, as if it hadn't acted at all. But now, every alien captain knew, this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a bluff. They had miscalculated. And now, the price was coming due. Chaos erupted across the alien fleet. Dozens of officers shouted over each other, trying to explain the anomaly. No debris, no energy signature, just absence. They reran the scans. Same result. One of their largest command ships had vanished entirely, and there was nothing to analyze, no data to dissect. The Terran vessel hadn't fired a visible weapon. No radiation. No heat spike. Just a silent erasure. Panic spread faster than commands. Technicians recalibrated instruments, assuming sensor failure. Engineers ran diagnostics. The idea that the human ship had done this was too uncomfortable to accept. Many still clung to the belief it was a fluke. A spatial anomaly, perhaps, or a cloaked mine from some long-forgotten war. Anything but intentional Terran action. Then came the second hit. Another ship, this one midline, disappeared in the same impossible fashion. There was no warning, no build-up. It was just gone. The silence after that strike was heavier than any explosion. Fleet formations faltered. Squadrons veered off course, unable to decide between attacking or retreating. The admiral barked orders to regroup, to maintain discipline, but his voice no longer carried weight. The illusion of control had broken. Attempts to re-establish scanning locks on the Terran ship failed. Every frequency met distortion. Attempts to ping it returned nothing. Signal interference blanketed the zone, jamming not just sensors but communications between alien vessels. Each ship became isolated, reliant on its own readings, unable to coordinate properly. One destroyer moved to flank the Terran ship on its own initiative. Its commander, frustrated and impulsive, fired without orders. The plasma bolt disappeared before reaching the hull, as if absorbed mid-space. A second shot yielded the same result. Then, the destroyer's systems failed, engines, life support, everything. Its lights flickered once and went dark, leaving it drifting lifeless. Now the fear turned into something colder. Not panic, but dread. The realization that the Terran ship wasn't defending itself. It wasn't acting in desperation. It wasn't even retaliating. It was controlling the battlefield. Commanders began issuing retreat commands, but navigation systems glitched. Star maps flickered. Orientation sensors spun without calibration. Ships attempting to flee found themselves looping or drifting off course. Gravitational fields around the Terran vessel warped space subtly, unpredictably, disabling warp vectors. Some tried to blind fire, unleashing mass barrages toward the human ship's position. The projectiles scattered mid-flight, redirected by invisible forces. Nothing struck the hull. The Terran ship remained untouched, unchanged. A lone analyst aboard one of the surviving flagships began cross-referencing ancient data. Hidden reports from the early days of Terran expansion. Rumors of classified projects. Silent fleets that vanished. Signals never answered. His findings weren't detailed, just redacted fragments. Enough to spark a terrifying idea that the ship before them wasn't a standard vessel. It was one of a kind. Designed in secret. Hidden from treaties. Unregistered. Purpose-built. A dreadnought with no name. No nation. Just purpose. He tried to warn the bridge officers, but before he could finish, the flagship's core destabilized. A soft hum, then implosion. Not outward destruction, internal collapse. Not a trace remained. The coalition fleet was unraveling. Confidence shattered. Communications down. Leadership scattered. And still, the Terran ship said nothing. It didn't demand surrender. Didn't broadcast threats. Its silence was more horrifying than open aggression. One admiral ordered an EMP cascade across all sectors, hoping to disable whatever cloaking or electronic manipulation the human ship was using. The pulse fired, but didn't propagate. The Terran ship had already dampened the surrounding space. Energy simply failed to travel. The laws of physics didn't seem broken, just rewritten, locally. The deeper realization struck them all at once. They weren't facing a warship. They were facing a response system, a final contingency. Not meant to fight wars, but to end them before they began. One senior commander began screaming into the local comms, demanding a ceasefire. Not out of strategy, but survival. The order reached no one. Lines were still jammed. His ship, now alone, tried to power down all systems as a gesture of submission. It vanished seconds later. Across the battlefield, ships drifted aimlessly. Their formations dissolved. Their weapons powered down. Not out of defeat, but resignation. The Terran ship hadn't moved since its first activation. It didn't need to. It was the battlefield now. A junior officer aboard one of the coalition carriers whispered to no one in particular. "We thought they were gone. We thought they were afraid." Then, quieter. "They were just waiting." And far ahead, in the darkness, the Terran vessel pulsed once more. The Terran ship advanced, not fast, not aggressively, but with cold precision. Its motion disrupted every calculation, its path unpredictable, like it wasn't following physics but bending them. Each meter it moved, more alien systems failed. Targeting software corrupted, propulsion lagged, power cores fluctuated. Attempts to adapt yielded no results. They weren't fighting a ship, they were being rewritten by its presence. Alien vessels opened fire again in desperation. The volley was massive, beams, warheads, plasma, all converging. But midway through their trajectory, everything fragmented. Projectiles scattered in impossible arcs. Energy blasts split into spirals, dissolving before impact. Defensive protocols didn't register hits, because there were none. It was as if the human ship commanded reality around itself, and no foreign force was allowed to function. Within seconds it retaliated, not with brute force, but with exact, surgical punishment. One alien destroyer cracked down the middle, its internal structure folding without fire or noise. Another had its atmosphere vented by a hole the size of a coin, placed perfectly between shield phases. One by one, ships were dismantled with terrifying restraint. There were no wasted shots, no unnecessary destruction. It didn't just kill, it edited. The coalition fleet panicked. They tried to scatter, to break formation and outrun the threat. But their paths were subtly redirected. Some drifted into each other, colliding at low speed, their guidance systems falsified by data injections. Others spun uncontrollably, engines throttled by their own computers, overridden with impossible commands. The Terran vessel didn't chase them. It didn't need to. Movement was irrelevant. Control was total. Throughout the battlefield, software was breaking down. Alien systems ran in loops. Commands repeated endlessly. Self-diagnostics returned results with human code fragments embedded, lines of unfamiliar logic that couldn't be purged. It was viral warfare, but not digital. It was deeper. Physical systems obeyed the foreign instructions as if built to do so. No one understood how. Every attempt to resist only accelerated collapse. Crew members aboard surviving ships reported internal disruptions. Doors locking, life support shifting temperature, emergency lights strobing in patterns they couldn't trace. Panic grew not because of visible damage, but because nothing made sense. The fleet wasn't under attack. It was being taken apart from the inside out. The alien flagship attempted to reboot its AI core. As the process began, screens flickered. Text scrolled in an unknown language, compact, minimal, precise. It wasn't a message. It was a countdown. The AI refused to respond. The core melted before the clock hit 0. Some tried to flee into hyperspace, but the required fields collapsed before activation. Coordinates scrambled. Time dilation looped. Vessels either failed to escape or vanished into unknown voids. A handful succeeded, but their engines shut down within hours. One was later found light years away, crew missing, systems clean, the bridge still cold. Every response plan failed. Tactical fallback zones were compromised. Evacuation ships couldn't launch. Medical cruisers reported power drains. One command carrier activated a failsafe self-destruct, only to find the sequence hijacked and neutralized seconds before detonation. The Terran ship remained mostly still. Every act of retaliation from the coalition resulted in precise, chilling consequences. A vessel charging its weapons found its energy redirected into its own shield array, cooking itself from the inside. Another tried to ram the human ship, hoping to at least cause damage. It never made contact. The moment it breached a specific radius, it simply disassembled. Not exploded. Not incinerated. Disassembled. Frame, plating, wiring, every part separated mid-flight and floated silently past the Terran hull. For every 10 ships that fell, only one was fired upon. The rest failed without contact. The implication was clear: it didn't need to shoot to destroy. Its presence alone unraveled everything around it. Command structures collapsed. No orders made it through. The chain of command dissolved as senior officers vanished with their ships. Survivors acted on instinct. Many disabled their weapons, powered down engines, and hoped for mercy. Others drifted aimlessly, unsure if they were still alive or already lost. The battlefield became silent. Not by choice, but by absence. Signals stopped. Movement ceased. What began as an invasion had become a graveyard. No smoke, no fire, just thousands of tons of drifting failure. And at the center of it all, the Terran ship hovered, unchanged, untouched, unbothered. It didn't claim territory. Didn't communicate. It just existed, like a silent judgment rendered by something ancient and patient. What few minds remained understood a single truth too late: the human vessel wasn't there to win. It was there to end. They had always misunderstood humanity. In the council chambers of distant empires, in the war rooms of old alliances, the Terrans were labeled predictable, emotional, backward. Easy to provoke, easy to corner. A species that burned bright but faded quickly. When humanity stopped expanding, when their fleets retreated from the outer zones and their embassies went silent, the galaxy assumed they had given up. What no one considered was the possibility that humans were done talking. Decades passed. Treaties were redrawn without Terran input. They didn't object. Trade routes shifted. Human outposts vanished from records. The galaxy interpreted their silence as surrender. But beneath that quiet, there was motion. Deep motion. Strategic motion. Earth turned inward not because it was afraid, but because it had learned. The last war humanity fought wasn't about territory or pride. It was about betrayal. Allies they'd bled for turned their backs. Protectorates they'd defended invited invasion. When the final battle was over and the embers cooled, humans didn't rebuild their fleet for vengeance. They built for deterrence so absolute that it didn't need to be seen. They didn't prepare for many wars. They prepared for one, the last one. What hovered in space now wasn't a warship by conventional standards. It was a construct born of all that history. Every loss. Every betrayal. Every pattern analyzed. Every treaty violation catalogued. It was designed in silence, far from political oversight, unacknowledged by any charter. Not to wage campaigns, but to stop them before they could begin again. The aliens never knew about Project Silentis. No one outside Earth did. It had no official records, no funding trails. Just fragments, rumors about a Terran vessel never spoken of twice in the same room. It was said to be manned by no crew, governed by codes so advanced it bordered on sentience, not artificial intelligence, but strategic conscience. Not emotional. Not reactive. Pure, mathematical logic built from pain. The Terran Council, before disbanding itself, passed one final motion. A doctrine of non-intervention, publicly a retreat, privately a warning. They would not seek revenge. But they would never allow another first strike to happen unnoticed again. The consequence would not be war. It would be erasure. The ship that now dismantled the alien fleet was not dispatched from orbit. It was already there, stationed for decades, buried in the shadows of asteroids, invisible to detection. Its purpose was not to patrol but to wait. Not to respond, but to end what someone else started. Its silence wasn't arrogance. It was function. No message needed sending. No negotiation needed drafting. The Coalition had made its choice when it crossed into Terran space, weapons hot, minds full of mockery. That moment activated the protocol. That line was the trigger. Every part of the ship was designed to analyze, disable, and dismantle entire fleets without full deployment. Weapons weren't visible because it didn't need to intimidate. It needed only precision. Its systems weren't reactive, they predicted. By the time the Coalition fired its first volley, the ship had already calculated every move they would make for the next 30 minutes. It didn't adapt. It anticipated. The virus that corrupted alien systems wasn't sent during the battle. It had been seeded years earlier, planted in open-source navigation patches and translation software, dormant until the exact sequence of signals activated it. The human engineers knew the Coalition's arrogance. They banked on it. They coded around it. The failure was always part of the plan. The real weapon was not kinetic. It was informational. The ship didn't destroy by force, it turned the enemy's own tech against itself. That was the cruel elegance of it. Terrans didn't overpower the Coalition. They let the Coalition collapse itself, nudged only slightly at the right pressure points. The remaining alien officers, if any lived long enough to think clearly, would have realized that they weren't even considered a threat. The ship didn't escalate. It didn't scale its power. It simply performed its role, without emotion, without malice. Just execution of a contingency crafted long before any of them took command. This wasn't about revenge. This was legacy. Humanity had decided long ago that it wouldn't seek a place at the table of interstellar politics anymore. It wouldn't plead for respect. It would offer one warning once, and build something terrible enough that it never needed to repeat it. That day had come. And it would be remembered not through stories or official reports, but through the sudden void left in the wake of a fleet that once believed it could intimidate silence. They didn't face a fleet. They triggered a memory. The battlefield was no longer a war zone. It was a graveyard. Ships that had once cast shadows over planets now floated as drifting husks. Fires flickered behind shattered hulls. Debris spun silently through the void, remnants of pride and arrogance reduced to fragments of twisted alloy. No comms crackled. No orders screamed. Only the hum of quiet systems still clinging to routines they no longer understood. From the wreckage, one ship survived, barely. A command cruiser, torn open along its spine, emergency lights flickering weakly. Life support limped on, oxygen thin, atmosphere unstable. Its crew huddled in darkness, afraid to speak, unsure if their signals were being watched. They didn't try to fire. They didn't try to flee. They knew nothing would matter now. Then, after all the silence, a sound came through. A single transmission. Audio only. No encryption. No signature. You were warned. The voice was calm. Unshaken. Male, human, but stripped of emotion. A tone not of vengeance but of fact. The alien captain, his face bloodied, his hands shaking, reached for the comm panel and pleaded. He stammered apologies, offered surrender, tried to explain. He said they didn't know. They weren't told. They hadn't understood what they were provoking. Another pause. You understood. You just thought we wouldn't remember. No further dialogue followed. No threats. No demands. The alien officer stared at the console, hoping for something more. A negotiation. A request. A signal that survival was still an option. None came. The screen dimmed. Lights on their ship's bridge flickered once more. Then everything stopped. Their core ceased humming. Artificial gravity failed. Lights died. Cold flooded in. For 7 seconds, everything was weightless and silent. Then, the cruiser was gone. Not obliterated. Not consumed. Just removed. A ripple in the void, and nothing remained. The Terran vessel, still at the center, pulsed once more and powered down. Its systems dimmed. Its weapons retracted. The impossible gravity fields dissipated. It returned to stillness, as though it had never acted. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was completion. No other ships stirred. There were none left. What had once been a declaration of conquest now hung as mute testimony to overconfidence. There would be no message sent back, no survivors to recount their mistakes. The Coalition fleet had entered Terran space as conquerors. It left nothing behind but silence. News of the loss didn't reach the outer colonies for weeks. Long-range probes found blank zones where signals once flowed. When a salvage team arrived under neutral banner, they found no functioning tech, no recovered data. Only void. Gravity distortions lingered, difficult to explain. The area was marked restricted by every major power. Quietly. No official statements. Just silence. But stories spread. Unofficial logs. Whispers. Testimonies from crews who weren't supposed to know. They spoke of a ship that never transmitted, never negotiated, never warned twice. A vessel left behind not to defend humanity, but to remind others why they should never be provoked again. In galactic archives, the incident was recorded under a sterile title. Terran Incident, Non-Compliant Engagement. No details. No footage. Just a date, a location, and a casualty count labeled as total. But among mercenaries, traitors, Outer Rim captains, a different name stuck. A phrase repeated quietly, with respect or fear depending on who spoke it. They called it the night humanity whispered. There were no parades, no celebrations, no political addresses. Earth didn't claim responsibility. No human voice emerged to declare victory. There was no need. The silence itself was answer enough. The ship never returned home. It wasn't meant to. Its purpose wasn't to defend a planet, but an idea that humanity had no intention of ruling the stars, but would never again be ruled. Its designers knew the galaxy would forget. They counted on it. That forgetfulness was the only necessary condition for the weapon to wake. The lesson was permanent. You don't threaten a species that learns from betrayal. You don't provoke those who perfect in silence. You don't cross a line they've marked, especially when they don't tell you where it is. Because by the time you realize it's been crossed, you're already gone. And somewhere, in the quiet of deep space, a single warship waits again. Not out of fear. Out of certainty.